Good morning, everybody. This morning and for the first part of the afternoon, we are going to hear live evidence which will be transmitted over the live link after a 15-minute delay. Those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Please stand. Please repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Can you give your full name to the inquiry, please?
Stephen John Beels.
Mr. Beels, you have given a witness statement to the inquiry, which is at MPS 0749339. It's at tab A1 of the bundles. That's the front page, and if we can go to the last page, please. You signed that statement on the 15th of March 2024, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And can you confirm that the contents of that statement is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. That can be taken down, thank you. You tell us in your witness statement at paragraph 7, page 3, that you first joined the Metropolitan Police Service on the 3rd of October 1977, is that right?
That's correct.
You joined Special Branch in April 1982 as a detective constable.
That's correct.
And you worked in various different parts of Special Branch at Heathrow Airport, dealing with Irish-related terrorism, then transferred to the Home Office for a short period. You were promoted to Detective Sergeant and went back into uniform for 3 years, is that right?
That's correct.
And you came back into Special Branch as a Detective Sergeant in 1985.
That's right, yes.
You tell us that you were posted to C Squad covering domestic extremism for 4 to 5 years. You then spent some time back at Heathrow Airport and then moved back to C Squad for 3 years before transferring to E Squad, then B Squad for 4 years doing general desk work and a more specialist role in B Squad for some 3 years before returning to C Squad on the public order desk, concentrating on left-wing extremism, but also dealing with right-wing extremism for some 3 or 4 years before you joined the SDS. Is that right?
That seems correct, yes.
Thank you. I want to ask you just a bit about your time on the public order desk in C Squad before you joined the SDS. You were on C Squad before joining the SDS for some 3 to 4 years. You joined the SDS, the inquiry understands, in October 2001 or thereabouts. Do you think that's right?
I remember because of 9/11 that I think my transfer to SDS was delayed for 2 or 3 months. Obviously, the implications for public order following 9/11. I don't think the management wanted the detective sergeant in charge of the desk to move straight on to SDS. So I don't think I took over from Detective Sergeant Tiddy. That was the plan, but I don't think it was he left Friday, I started Monday. I think there was a 2 or 3 month delay, which may well have slipped into January 2002.
Thank you. So going by those sort of dates, I think you would have been on C Squad public order desk from sometime around the end of 1997 or the beginning of 1998. Do you think that's about right?
About right, yes.
And in your role on the public order desk in C Squad prior to joining the SDS, you remember that you received intelligence from the SDS, is that right?
Yes.
And you would have known that it came from that particular unit, would you?
I would, yes.
How was that intelligence relevant from a public order perspective to the work that you were doing at the time?
My role on C Squad, public order desk, was as the sergeant in charge of 3 or 4 DCs, constables, who together were putting together threat assessments for our uniformed colleagues. So we had to build up a good picture of what the threats to public order were during that time. So we would be collating sources from collating information, intelligence from all different sources, of which SDS was obviously one part. We would then, having collected that, we would then assess it, and then we would disseminate it in the appropriate form to whoever the customer was, which was quite often the Uniform Public Order Branch, whose title I can't quite remember, but something like TO20 or CO11.
Thank you. You say that you would have shared intelligence with customers and they would have told you if there was something urgent you needed to know, because you were the desk point of contact for the SDS when you were on C Squad. How were the requirements for intelligence gathering set for the SDS?
They were set far above my level. They were the senior management from various squads would have tasking and coordinating meetings, I think, regularly. And there was as far as I can recall, there was a register of what the intelligence requirements were. And I think from memory on that register would be the groups that were to be monitored for threats to public order in the C Squad case. So that intelligence requirement would be something that we were aware of on the desk, and that's where we would direct our resources.
And you say it was set far above your level. At what sort of level did you understand it was set?
I think certainly the squad chief level, so chief superintendent. But I know we'll come on to sort of Mike Dell, who's in charge of the SDS unit, would go along to these sort of meetings, and they would discuss what is the situation in London, in terms of public order. What are our requirements? Now, how often they met, I can't remember, but I know there would be, intelligence requirement updates, and we would then, at the desk level, would utilise all our different sources to try and get the clearest, complete picture of what the threat is, and therefore we would produce assessments for our uniform colleagues when they were planning policing of events in London, principally.
So did you understand that SDS targeting was directed by C Squad?
Largely, yes.
And how was that direction transmitted to the SDS from C Squad?
So my understanding was that the SDS would be present at these tasking meetings. So they would be aware, C Squad would be aware of what the intelligence requirements were. I think it's the best way I can explain it.
So were there direct requests to the SDS from C Squad during those meetings?
I wasn't present at the meetings, so...
Was that your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes, I would say.
And I think you say in your witness statement at paragraph 11, you wouldn't know the officer who had collected intelligence, just the unit it had come from. So you didn't know the identities of particular UCOs, is that right?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
At paragraph 11 of your statement, page 4, you say that on C Squad public order desk you were collating intelligence for public order threat assessments, and you say that sometimes you were told that intelligence was from the SDS because it would give it more value and credibility. Why would it give it more value and credibility coming from the SDS rather than another source?
Because they were intelligence trained, developed, vetted police officers. They weren't informants that might be motivated in different ways.
How useful was the SDS intelligence in comparison to intelligence from other sources?
Well, obviously, intelligence you have to assess it as a whole. It's difficult to be a bit sort of selective to say, well, this bit of intelligence is much better than that because it comes from that source. I think, and bear in mind, all their intelligence reports are graded. So when we receive them, they would be generally graded like a B2. So we'd know that that source was considered reliable. So in terms, obviously if I knew it was coming from SDS, my expectation would be that information would be reliable and accurate.
More accurate than intelligence coming from other sources, in your view?
Well, it's impossible to say. The grading for a source, let's say a chiz in a group, that intelligence might be just as accurate, might be just as reliable as an SDS. It would have to be taken, on their own merits, but they might both be graded, let's say B2, which is, reliable and accurate information. So it's difficult. But in my head, the motivation for somebody outside the SDS, for a normal member of public who might be a chiz, their motivations, having been a handler of informants, can be totally different. Their motivations might be financial or something else, in which case, I have to assess the reliability in that sort of context. Whereas with a police officer giving the evidence, intelligence rather, I think I could have a safer degree of reliance on that intelligence.
And was that a view widely held in C Squad?
Yes, it was, yes.
What was the process in C Squad for dealing with intelligence received from other sources that covered the same areas as the SDS intelligence?
Well, all intelligence on the groups that were being monitored, so where there was an intelligence requirement, all the source reports, the intelligence reports, would come into us just through a paper system, and or in the early days, and we would receive them, and then we would make an assessment, and that would then be informing our threat assessment. So we were keeping an eye on the public order situation for London, every day. And the reports were coming in from different sources all the time. Bear in mind, be open sources as well that would be looking at, publications, media, members of the public phoning in. There'd be police officers on district who would be picking up information. They would feed that through. So all these different pieces of information were coming in, and we were having to assess them and then disseminate them in form of, for example, a threat assessment.
And what did C Squad do if intelligence from other sources contradicted that of the SDS intelligence?
Well, we'd try and look at the context. So, it's difficult without speaking about a specific example, but we would look at the context, we would look at the reliability of the source and do whatever checks were possible. We might go back to the handler. If it was a chiz, if it was an open source, we'd obviously be able to go to the source ourselves. If it was SDS, we'd be able to go back through the management or the cover officers to get some sort of better feel for that intelligence.
And was the accuracy and utility of SDS intelligence fed back to the SDS?
Whether there was a formal process, I can't remember all these years, but I would, as the sergeant on the desk, I was normally the first port of call when the cover officers came to Scotland Yard, because they would come, 2-3 times a week with intelligence, and they would often sit down with me or one of my colleagues and discuss, the intelligence that they picked up during that time and be shared with me. So it was, very much a sort of verbal interaction, but supported by the intelligence reports which they would hand over.
And what happened to SDS intelligence before it was passed up the chain of command or included in a threat assessment?
All the intelligence reports would be on a file or a paper audit trail with a minute sheet. So it would come to us, and then we would send it on. We would probably extract the information, the intelligence, for our reports, but the actual report would then go up the chain to the squad chiefs before it's then sent off to records for registration.
And were reports that you received on C Squad before they were disseminated upwards, were they sanitised or reviewed for content that was considered inappropriate, disproportionate, or not for a lawful purpose? Was that part of the assessment?
At the C squad level,
Yeah.
I'm sure it would have been done, but usually if it's CHIS source, the CHIS handler would be trained in RIPA, for instance. So there would be an expectation by the time the intelligence got onto a report that came to C squad, it had been through some process. Same with SDS, you would expect them, as obviously came on to know, to have assessed the intelligence, whether it was necessary, proportionate, whether there was collateral intrusion, and then pass that into the system. So at that stage, you know, there may be something jumped out at me and said, that's not right, or is that necessary? I can't think of specific examples, but that would be part of the process, yes.
So was collateral intrusion considered on C squad before intelligence was disseminated further?
It wasn't part of, I would say it wasn't part of the formal process, because I think that part of the process was done when the report was written up. Bear in mind, SDS intelligence would normally have been through the SDS management before it came over to C squad. So I think by the time we were the recipients of the intelligence, we weren't necessarily, and I say, I mean, we may well have been, but not as a matter of course. We're assessing each piece of intelligence for its RIPA compliance. We would have expected that to be done before it got to us. But it may be something that stood out. That's you know, that shouldn't be there, type of thing.
And what did you know during your time on C squad about SDS tradecraft? For example, would there have been an interest in undercover officers taking on positions of responsibility in their target groups, or being regular drivers for the group?
At the C squad level, we just wouldn't know, you know, unless I'd worked it out myself. But we wouldn't know. No.
And was there ever any interrogation or questioning by C squad of what means the SDS were using to obtain intelligence?
No.
Did C squad have knowledge of the level of access to groups, key individuals, and how deeply a group had been infiltrated? Did you have that awareness?
My awareness would be just simply by the nature of the reporting. You know, you would be able to read a report, and not every time, but from time to time, you would be thinking, well, this is coming from a source that's close to the leadership of a group. Bear in mind, a lot of these reports weren't solitary reports. There would be a pattern. So you'd probably work out yourself, if you're reasonably intelligent, that source is quite close, or might be at that level of a group, just by working out, but we weren't actually told.
So you would have had an understanding from your own assessment of the level of proximity
We'd have an
UCOs
idea.
had
Yeah.
to activists. Was there ever any suspicion at that time of UCOs being in sexual relationships with activists?
No, not at all.
I want to just ask you about a meeting you had while you were on the public order desk in C squad with HN81 David Hagan on the 14th of May 1998. DS Steve Tiddy chairs the meeting. 3 members of the public order desk are present at DI HN 1037, a DC, and you. There's a document which details the meeting. It's MPS 001062. It's tab B27, sir, of the bundle, at page 1. And we see there in the top line that you're present in order to discuss matters of mutual interest, and Mr. Tiddy, ST, chaired the meeting. Do you have any recollection of this meeting now?
The first time I've seen this report, and I obviously accept it's true and I was there, I've got no recollection of it.
We understand that it took place in Detective Sergeant Tiddy's garden. Do you have any recollection of that?
I have been to his house a few times. In fact, we became sort of social friends. So I've been to his garden and family events there. So to have a meeting there, I can't recall, no.
Would you have found meeting for work purposes in someone's garden unusual?
No, I mean, I had meetings in my house when I was SDS because we risk-assessed venues, and sometimes, you know, depending on the nature of the environment, it might be the safest option.
So it wasn't unusual to have meetings either in your time on C Squad or on the SDS in someone's house or garden?
On C Squad, this should stick out to me because I didn't regularly meet SDS officers, so I'm just trying to think back, but obviously it's some time ago. I think if it was in his garden, DS Tilly would have made appropriate arrangements so that it was a secure, operationally secure venue. I can't say more than that, really.
Do you have any recollection of what C Squad wanted to know from the SDS, and in particular HN 81?
I know. I can see there's there's certainly 4 groups that would have been of interest to C Squad.
In the second paragraph.
Yeah, present a breakdown of the way. Okay, yeah. Sorry, what was the question about that?
Do you recall what C Squad wanted to know from the
Not
SDS, and in particular HN 81?
Not specifically, no. I mean,
Presumably it was an update on those groups and you know, general public order implications.
The third paragraph records that the DI presented a breakdown of the way Mr. Hagan's reports were being treated and how they were used, marketed and caveated, and that reassured him as to the value that was being placed on his report writing and developed into a lengthy discussion on disclosure. Do you have any recollection now about what was said about the dissemination of his reporting from the SDS?
no.
Do you recall where HN 81's reports were being sent?
Where they were being sent? No.
Who they were being disseminated to onwards from C Squad?
From C Squad, as C Squad as the recipient, they would be, the intelligence would be used for the threat assessments. After that, it would go through the C Squad management structure, who would then just probably place it on the file in Central Registry.
DI HN 1037 told Operation Hearn that this wasn't a tasking meeting, it was more a pat on the back meeting. Do you have that sort of impression?
I can't remember, sorry.
Following this meeting, did HN 81's report become more focused on his involvement in Movement for Justice and their involvement in the Macpherson inquiry?
Well, firstly, I don't remember this meeting, so it's a bit difficult then to assess where it was. So all I can say is we were interested in the Movement for Justice, which we knew as the Movement for Justice by any means necessary, as their correct title at the time. They were of interest of us because I think the intelligence was that they were trying to infiltrate possibly the Lawrence campaign with their sort of revolutionary ideas of building up the antagonistic mood, if you like, of any crowds that might be attending the inquiry.
Just looking then at the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the Macpherson inquiry, you say at paragraph 181, at pages 75 to 76 of your statement, that the Stephen Lawrence murder and the inquiry predated your time as a manager on the SDS. And you say, as far as I'm aware, the SDS's only role in relation to the Stephen Lawrence Justice campaign and the Macpherson inquiry was in relation to public order assessments on groups potentially seeking to cause disorder at the inquiry itself. I'm not aware that such activity had any impact on any justice campaigns. And you say at paragraph 182, as far as I'm aware, the SDS had not been tasked formally or informally to obtain information relating to or stemming from the Stephen Lawrence Justice Campaign. Is that right?
Yes, that's my understanding still, yeah.
In your time on C Squad,
Yep.
you were aware of SDS reporting specifically on the Stephen Lawrence campaign, is that right?
On the groups around the campaign.
In MPS 0723200 on page 4, paragraph 2.5, you're described in this report, which is the author is an MPS C Squad officer who says that they assisted with assessing compiling reports on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the inquiry and liaised with relevant desks in C Squad. And you're described there as one of the main leads on intelligence relating to the Stephen Lawrence campaign. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with the terminology. I know what the author's probably trying to say.
How would you describe yourself in terms of the intelligence relating to the Stephen Lawrence
I
campaign?
can see that gives the impression that we were interested in, for some reason, the actual campaign itself. No, we were interested in what is the public order threat around the campaign, particularly the Macpherson inquiry, when we were getting regular, crowds outside, what is the threat? That was my principal concern, is what do the uniformed police need to know when the inquiry is sitting, or any other elements of that where there might be public disorder. So the idea was that we would get the intelligence on some of the groups that we knew were active in inciting public disorder, get that intelligence so that we could tell the uniform either is a threat or is not a threat, or the threat is low or the threat is high on a particular day or on a particular event.
Thank you. That could be taken down now, please. You authored a detailed report on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and associated organisations. It's dated the 10th of September 1998, and it's at MPS 0748392. Page 2, please, reports on the Lawrence campaign and included... So that's the front page of the report. We see the date and the title at the top, Stephen Lawrence Campaign, Associated Organisations, and at the bottom, the Lawrence Family Campaign Group is detailed. And over the page, third paragraph, please. This report includes quite deeply personal details and information about the Lawrence family itself, doesn't it?
Yes.
Why was it necessary to report those details?
I think for context, what is happening, is this going to have an effect on the campaign in any way? I think it's important perhaps to understand that special branch officers, when they were trained in intelligence, if I can just say this, just for context and for understanding of the officer's mindset when they do this reporting, is that when an officer joins special branch, they start a 2 to 3 week course, an induction course. During that course, they are made abundantly clear that they have become part of the intelligence community, that they are going to be working with the security services quite closely, and that they have, where they were previously police officers, police in the street somewhere, from now on they're more or less intelligence officers, and they need to understand what intelligence is. So we were trained. Intelligence is based on 3 essential principles: the need to know. So your intelligence must only be shared with those who need to know. Secondly, that intelligence will be protected, so it will be classified under the protective marking scheme. So it will be secret, confidential, restricted, or unrestricted. That gives the officer confidence that when he's writing intelligence reports, that it's not going to end up in the public domain, It's not going to end up on the internet or anything. So he has confidence that he can report information that will be only available for those who need to know on strict handling conditions, if I can just finish. And then the third thing is that you're taught that intelligence is jigsaw, that you should report everything you know on a particular subject to get the complete picture. Any piece of data, it could be a partial telephone number, partial email address, might seem irrelevant at the time, but could become very important later. A partial telephone number could lead to an IRA terrorist cell, for instance, identified subjects. So the point I'm trying to make is the officers were trained to include as much data as possible in their intelligence reports. So the author of that, whoever supplied the source of the information, the intelligence, may not have known what the full picture is, so may have thought this might be relevant, so would have put it in.
But why are deeply personal details about the family themselves and the campaign itself, not organisations connected to it from the far left who are trying to infiltrate it and use it for their own purposes, why are those details necessary and proportionate to include?
I think because, as I say, the source has tried to create the full picture, and this is what's happening, and also that this information is not going to go outside restricted circles. So it's almost background briefing, this is the mood of the campaign, this is happening. I can see now, in the light of the time from then to now, with hindsight, it probably is. It does look intrusive, discourteous, disrespectful.
It's more than collateral reporting, isn't it? It's reporting directly on the family itself and the campaign.
But as I say, the intention is to create the full picture.
Thank you. That can be taken down. In 1999, you were still working on the public order desk in C Squad, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
There's a document, MPS 0749507, please. This is a CO11 document, and we understand CO11 to be the Public Order Intelligence Unit.
That's right, yes.
Is that right?
Yes, I was trying to think of earlier, yes.
Yeah. At page 5, paragraph 5.1, your name's spelt incorrectly, but it is.
Often.
Is that is that referring to you?
Yes.
And it says that you were nominated as the intelligence liaison officer for this operation, which was to pass intelligence from the SDS on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the Macpherson inquiry. Were you aware of requests for information on the Stephen Lawrence campaign or the Macpherson inquiry being passed from the public order desk to the SDS specifically?
Sorry, for the public order desk to
the SDS.
For intelligence gathering purposes.
Yes, to request for information on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the Macpherson inquiry.
Are we looking at this highlighted paragraph?
That's the paragraph that deals with you. The document, if we go back to page 1, is entitled The Stephen Lawrence Inquiry Report, Pan MPS CO11 Intelligence Unit.
Okay.
And we can see there its purpose is stated to monitor events and gather intelligence on the likely public order implications arising from the publication of the Macpherson report, and to provide a daily briefing to Gold London, i.e. Commander Messenger. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
So you were aware that CO11, and indeed the public order desk on C Squad, was interested in the Macpherson inquiry report, its publication, having the potential to spark disorder. Is that right?
Was the view at the time, yes.
Because you were nominated as the intelligence liaison officer for the operation described in this document.
That's correct.
Yeah. Did you make requests to the SDS to gather such intelligence?
I cannot recall, but I would accept that I may well have done. I would be looking for all sources of intelligence to get the complete picture as best I can of what the threat is when the report is issued. So yes, I probably would have done, yes.
And do you think in those requests you gave any guidance as to the need to avoid collateral intrusion in relation to the family and the campaign?
I don't think I did, no.
Why not?
I think because we were dealing with SDS reports on a regular basis, so I wasn't laying down specific parameters each time we were looking for intelligence. I think the expectation was that the SDS would understand what collateral intrusion was and, would restrict their reporting accordingly. I don't think I needed to tell them.
We know from a document, we don't need to put, that can be taken down, thank you. We don't need to put it on screen, but for your reference, it's MPS 0749538, that you received a report from Plumstead Police Station regarding criminal damage to Stephen Lawrence's memorial plaque by a far-right criminal. And it's noted it should be kept, the report should be kept with any other presumably correspondence on the incident. Do you remember receiving such a report?
I don't. I remember the incident, but I don't remember the report, no.
Assuming you did receive such a report, why do you think you were receiving that type of report?
On the criminal damage to the memorial?
The plaque, yeah.
Because I would have thought that had potential for serious public order problems from if anything, from the extreme right wing and, the anti-fascist movements.
And would such a report have been kept on file with all the other intelligence surrounding the campaign and the Macpherson inquiry?
I don't know, but I would suspect so.
And do you know what correspondence the report was referring to?
I don't know.
Mr. Hagan, HN81, gave some evidence to Operation Hearn. We don't need it on screen, but for reference, it's MPS 0721941. And he said that he reported on public order aspects of the Stephen Lawrence campaign to DS Tiddy, DI Lambert and DCI HN58. And he said that he was informed at the height of the Macpherson inquiry that his reporting was going straight to Sir Paul Condon's desk each morning via you. And that DS Tiddy passed on to him, from you, congratulations from the Commissioner for your excellent reporting. And DS Tiddy gave some evidence that he didn't remember this but would have no reason to doubt that it was true. And that if you had said something like that to him about the reporting of UCOs contributing to intelligence being sent to C Squad, then he would have passed that message on. Were you passing intelligence directly to the Commissioner on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the Macpherson inquiry?
I think firstly, well, I'd say no. I think the reason for that is I had no direct access to the Commissioner. If anything of that nature was submitted, it would go through the management system. Whether it was going to sanitised form into CO11, for instance, then upwards to the Commissioner, I don't know.
And do you recall ever getting a message either directly from the Commissioner or passed down through the chain of command from him to pass on to the SDS his congratulations for this excellent reporting?
No. I think I'd remember, for something like that. If the top boss said thank you for a particular, operation or something, I think I'd remember, but I have no recollection.
If you had received that kind of feedback from above you in the chain of command, would you have passed it on?
To SDS?
Yes.
I can think of no reason why I wouldn't, no.
While on the public order desk in C Squad, were you aware of requests for information on Roger Sylvester's funeral and inquest being passed to the SDS? Roger Sylvester was a black man who had died in hospital after being restrained by 8 police officers in 1999.
I remembered that, but I don't remember anything about reporting, no.
Were you aware of any requests for information on a family vigil being passed to the SDS?
No.
What was the public order desk's, or indeed CO11, the public order intelligence unit's interest in the Roger Sylvester family and its campaign?
I don't think we were.
If we could look at, please, MPS 0748489 at tab B28. This is a file showing that it was referred to C Squad, which you can see from the left-hand column around about the bottom third of the page. So we can see C Squad on the left-hand side there. Page 2 shows that the intention was for intelligence to be provided to CO24, which was the Racial and Violent Crime Task Force about race crime. You can see that at the top, in the top paragraph.
Yes.
At the bottom of page 2, it shows that there was a minute sheet, an attachment on the Stephen Lawrence campaign. Do you see that at the
Yes.
bottom? And at page 3, there's a note by Colin Black that he would like to see a flow of suitable material to DS, and the name is redacted, in CO24, the Racial Violent Crime Task Force. Both tactical intelligence around the Lawrence inquiry and broader work on race crime. It's the note at the top of the page. Do you see that?
Yes.
Were you aware of this at the time when you were on the public order desk in C Squad, that there was such a request?
No, I have no recall.
What would the purpose have been of providing the Racial and Violent Crime Task Force intelligence or a flow of suitable material on the Lawrence inquiry?
It's difficult for me to assess with just this in front of me, but again, I would think we were looking at context of the time and everything around it, but I can't say more than that, to be honest.
Do you know what information was provided as a result of this policy implementation?
I have no recollection.
And so you wouldn't know what the role of the SDS was in contributing to it?
This was when I was on C Squad. Yes, no.
On page 3 at the bottom of the page, there's a note to acting DI Beels. Is that you, do you think?
Well, it must be, yes. Well, yes.
And it says, please note brief details of assessment supplied to date, up to and including Ricky Real March and return.
Please note brief details of assessment supplied to date, up to and including. Yes.
Another document shows at page 5, MPS 0722486. This is not in your bundle, but in HN85, sir. Shows that you passed on various documents to, as we see at the top there, various documents to a DS McDowell in CO24. Do you see that?
Yes.
And they seem to include threat assessments on the Stephen Lawrence campaign, the McPherson inquiry, and Ricky Real,
yes.
the Ricky Real campaign, the threat assessment.
Yes.
There's a threat assessment written by you on the Ricky Real March, dated the 14th of October 1998. We don't need to see it on the screen, but it's at page 172 of MPS 0722498. Did threat assessments written by you on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the Ricky Real March rely on SDS intelligence?
It's difficult to say because there could have been intelligence from all sorts of sources.
And would you have briefed those above you in the chain up to the Commissioner as to the source or provenance of the intelligence underlying the threat assessment?
As to the nature of the source, unlikely, unless the context of the source was relevant for those
up the chain, but not as a matter of routine, no.
Thank you. That can be taken down now, please. So what was the policing purpose then for carrying out threat assessments on the Ricky Reel campaign and the Stephen Lawrence campaign?
It would have been to see if there's any likelihood of disorder associated with these campaigns, perhaps from the extreme right wing.
And did the intelligence you received contain information on the campaigns themselves?
I'd have to be shown some examples, but again, I think any reporting on these campaigns sounds like an old record, but it would be for context.
So did some of the intelligence go further than what was strictly necessary for a public order threat assessment?
Again, I can't really say without any sort of specific examples put in front of me, but not as a matter of routine, unless there was a specific request or requirement.
In your witness statement at paragraph 172, it's page 73, you describe that many justice campaigns were fronts for or being exploited by more extremist groups. Was that an opinion you held while you were on the public order desk in C Squad?
I think that was our assessment based on historical events, for instance, that we knew full well that every time there was a campaign that was emotive, that had justice behind it, then there would be self-serving groups who'd want to exploit those families and, their grief, because it would make headlines. It might mobilise, public, in which case there would be a public order threat. So that was the way that we viewed it.
And was that an opinion widely held within the unit?
I think so, yes.
Did CO11, the Public Order Intelligence Unit, agree with that view? Do you know?
I can't say. Knowing the little that I can remember from liaison with CO11, they were focused on how many people are going to be at this event on this day, what's the makeup of that group, we're looking at the demographic makeup, the political makeup, to get what the mood of the event, that's what they were focused on. So anything outside that would probably be highly irrelevant to them.
And the campaigns that we've been talking about, the Roger Sylvester Justice campaign, the Ricky Reel campaign and the Stephen Lawrence campaign, were those the campaigns that were identified and viewed as being fronts, as you described in your statement?
I think to use front might be a clumsy term, and I don't think we were particularly selective of those campaigns. It may well be that they were the major campaigns at any particular point in time that were presenting a potential threat to public order. Not by the campaign itself, but by those linked or associated or attempting to jump on the bandwagon.
And was that an opinion you continued to hold whilst you were on the SDS?
Yes, I think, yes.
And was that an opinion widely held within the SDS in the time you were there?
In terms of extremist groups, we were looking at revolutionary groups, if you like, who would seek as a tactic to use these campaigns. I think we accepted that was for these groups normal practice.
Thank you. Want to look at then your time on the SDS and who were your contemporaries in the time that you were there. When you joined, the detective inspector was HN 53 and he was succeeded by HN 72 and then eventually by DI Andrew Horsley, who I think you say in your witness statement you don't recall.
No recollection.
You remember the first two?
No, I think I was close to, if not having retired.
And in relation to the detective chief inspector, when you joined, it was HN 36 DCI Michael Dell, and he was succeeded by DCI Julian McKinney and then DCI Francis Flood. Is that right?
That's right.
Just in relation to DCI Dell, then, you describe him in your witness statement at paragraph 46B at page 15 as a very effective manager because he was straightforward, he had a strong moral compass and was very clear in his instructions, and you say you worked with him on a daily basis. He chaired the twice-weekly meetings. All management would be present at those meetings. He was a manager that you got on with and you respected, is that right?
Yes, I'd worked with him before SDS in any case.
In contrast, you say about DCI McKinney's management style that he was aloof, remote, abrupt and lacking in empathy. You felt he didn't approve of the SDS, didn't respect it and had a hidden agenda to shut it down. His management style was poor and it engendered a lack of trust. And you only had occasional personal interaction with him. He attended the unit only once every couple of weeks. So you make a direct contrast between him and your previous DCI. Is that right?
It is. I'm very uncomfortable, but I was asked the question. I don't like what was almost effectively office gossip, if you like, but I understood the reason for the questioning. So as I was asked by the inquiry, I felt I had to give an honest answer.
Was there a sense during his tenure that the SDS was quite resistant to change or any external accountability?
To Mr. McKinney? Resistance, I think when somebody new comes in, at whatever level, how they present themselves can have an effect, obviously. And his manner, I think, just got people's backs up straight away. But he was the manager, so, police officers, there's a discipline force, you get on with the job. Obviously, his style of management was something very different, and I think there was sort of resentment from what had been one style of management was being taken, as I've said, the fact that there were infrequent visits and minimal contact with the officers, obviously exacerbated that situation.
In a report commissioned by DCI Flood, carried out by DSHN 1656, as to how well the use of event logs were being received. Event logs, I think, were a new way of recording SDS intelligence. Is that right? And they were introduced towards the end of the SDS. Do you recall?
Event logs?
Yeah.
I have no recollection, no. Again, I may have been working towards retirement, the unit potentially closing down, so, I might not have been familiar with those.
Do you recall that there was a resistance by UCOs to their use?
I don't remember what they were, so no, I can't.
Was there a sense that anything new coming in from outside, the SDS would resist any type of change?
No, I think that would be to paint an incorrect picture. The officers that I dealt with, the UCOs, were very very aware of the situation, and were very adaptable people. And I think delivered in the right way, where change is explained, because we're all resistant to change, but and particularly people in these highly sensitive situations, high pressure situations, they can be very sensitive to things, but I don't think that means they were resistant to change. I think the change just needed to be presented in a more professional manner.
I just want to look briefly at your role in the SDS. You joined as a detective sergeant. You say at paragraph 15, page 5 of your witness statement that you considered yourself to be a supervisor in the SDS and not a manager. You considered the DI and the DCI to be managers of the unit. What do you understand the distinction to be between being a supervisor and a manager?
I think that was just across special branch. If you were a detective sergeant, you didn't attend management meetings. You were more shop floor. So I know other officers, my colleagues, have referred to them as managers, but just my personal understanding was management was the next level up. We were closer to the shop floor doing the supervision.
Supervision of the UCOs themselves. Thank you. I want to look just briefly at training, please. You say at paragraph 48, page 21 of your witness statement, that you didn't have any formal training for your role in the SDS, is that right?
I didn't, no. I didn't have formal training in terms of managing, supervising UCOs. I was trained previously as an informant handler, CHIS handler, but not UCOs.
Yes, you say you'd undertaken the advanced level 3 informant covert human intelligence sources handling course prior to joining the SDS, is that right?
That's correct. I can't remember when, but yes, that's correct.
And did you find that training useful in your role at the SDS?
In terms of very different type of scenarios where you're dealing with, say, a member of the public who's become an informant, because a lot of the training would be about what is the motivation. You know, we didn't have that issue with UCOs. Was it useful? I'm sure there were aspects of it that were useful. You know, we dealt with public interest immunity issues, for example, and I had to present, we had to handle an informant over the period of 2 weeks, build up a case and present it to a real judge as a PII application. So it was that type of more crime-oriented training that was undertaken. It helped me in certain respects, but I don't think it was not focused on UCO type work.
Would you have found more bespoke training for the role you had in the SDS helpful at the time? Do you think there should have been
With
that type of
hindsight,
training?
yes, definitely.
You also say in your witness statement at paragraph 50, pages 21 to 22, that after Stephen Lawrence's murder, there was police-wide race relations training. Did you undertake that training?
I remember attending a 1 or 2 day course, yes.
And just briefly, what do you remember that training covering?
I think I said in my statement, I seem to remember we were a group of police officers from all different backgrounds. I don't think it was a special branch dedicated course. And we were addressed by community representatives, community groups from different ethnic backgrounds, and given sort of the history. And I remember the sort of example would be, you know, we were told that when you address a young African Caribbean male, perhaps when you're, you know, a police officer, you're stopping them, that you can misread signals. So the fact that they wouldn't necessarily look you in the eye was a cultural difference. It wasn't a matter of disrespect. So that was helping officers to understand that, you know, there are different approaches by people from different backgrounds that we needed to be aware of. It was that type of level of training.
And so was that applicable? Was it relevant to your role in the SDS, or was it more public-facing oriented?
It was probably more public-facing, but what it did, it raised awareness.
You say at paragraph 54, page 23 of your statement, that you didn't undertake any racial incident awareness training during the course of your tenure in the SDS, but you had done previously. Is that the training you're referring to?
Yes.
Dealing with your supervision of undercover officers then in your time at the SDS. At paragraph 65, page 27 of your statement, you say that the UCOs would generally produce intelligence orally to the DS responsible for them, who would then prepare an intelligence report which would then go to HN53 and or DCI Dell. And the DI and or DCI would see the reporting, and then either one or both of them were generally present at either one or both of the field meetings each week where UCOs would give a brief on their targeting. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, correct, yes.
You say at paragraph 73, page 29 of your statement, that in my supervisory role I had daily contact with my designated UCOs who would phone in twice a day, and I would be on hand to take their calls and to respond to any issues they may have encountered. And you had the twice weekly meetings with UCOs as a diary fixture, and all DSs would attend those meetings, and the meetings were conducted as a group. And you would also meet with UCOs. You managed perhaps for a coffee or more private or individual meetings if necessary. And you say, I maintained contact with the UCOs' families from time to time, and I would visit them on a 6 monthly or so basis. So how would you maintain contact with the UCOs' families?
It may be a phone call, it may be a personal visit. Some of the UCOs more often than others. I would go along. Sometimes we would have an intelligence meeting, if you like, share of an intelligence meeting, but it might be at the family home and the spouse might be present, in which case, we would have a conversation there. There was no formal structure to it. It was just me being conscious that I should be, seeing the family background, etc.
And would the nature of the discussions also involve personal matters or not?
With
the family?
Yes, if it was relevant, and also be just casual conversation as you would, how are you doing? How are the children? That type of thing.
And were you trying to ensure that partners were performing a welfare role in relation to supporting the UCO in their deployment?
Yes.
Did you talk to UCOs about their personal lives?
Yes.
And were you, in your role as supervisor, were you interested in trying to spot if there were issues, or would you generally wait for a UCO to flag a particular issue with you?
Well, I say it was a two-way process. I've been a supervisor for something like 25 years. I was promoted as sergeant when I was a young 25-year-old, fresh-faced, uniformed police officer, having to deal with police constables at a police station who'd been working there for 20-odd years. So, I had to adapt my supervisory style to meet those needs. So I sort of developed a style of supervision over 20-odd years. I would call it a sort of trust and observe type of supervision. So I think my default position would be one of trust, but also keeping an eye on things, picking up any signals or any indicators that things weren't quite right. And that was the style I used when I was in the SDS.
Thank you. I want to look at just your role in terms of being a handler or cover officer for particular UCOs. Is there any difference between a handler and a cover officer, or do they amount to the same thing?
No, there's quite a substantial difference, I suppose, because I saw my role as a cover officer for UCOs as dealing with three aspects, really. It was welfare, obviously, as a priority. Operational security, LSAFE, what are they doing, how are they doing it, and also intelligence management, so, collecting, assessing and disseminating the intelligence. So I had all those three aspects. With a CHIS, it was slightly different. You weren't having daily contact. So in terms of operational security, the operational security only really was relevant when you're actually having a meeting with them or a communication with them. Welfare, again, if they were an informant, they weren't particularly interested in you speaking to their wives and partners, whatever. So I would say, quite a difference.
At paragraph 80B at page 32 of your statement, you say that you were handler for HN 104 Carlos Saraki and HN 118 Simon Wellings, and you think for a short time HN 79, is that right? Do you recall
Yes.
them? At paragraph 80B, you also say you may have been HN 18 Rob Hastings handler for a short time before DS Gilbertson took responsibility for him. Do you think that's right?
I think so, yes.
And so what did being those particular UCO's handler entail in terms of your responsibilities for supervising them?
Well, as I've said, the three elements that I considered of welfare, operational security, intelligence management, they were the bread and butter.
So you
stuff.
would have had an in-depth knowledge of the reporting of those UCOs for whom you were handler, is that right?
Yes.
You say at paragraph 111A at page 45 of your statement that cover officers would generally know where their UCO would be, and that usually during the twice daily phone calls, the UCO would say if they were staying at their DUF, their cover address, that night. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so would you be keeping tabs on where a UCO was staying on a daily basis?
It depends what you mean by keeping tabs. If I wasn't putting surveillance on them, I wasn't phoning them at the address to make sure they were there. So keeping tabs on them would be just understanding, generally at the meetings, they would have said on a Tuesday, I'm spending a week here at the cover address, or I'm attending these events, or there's an event that might be taking place, I might have to travel somewhere, that type of thing. And then obviously if they phoned in on the Friday and said something different, that might be an indicator that I need to check something.
And so was there a safety consideration to knowing where they were each night?
Yes.
And if UCOs were unable to state in advance where they would be staying the night, would they be expected to tell their handler in the back office afterwards or not?
Yes, I would think generally, yes.
You say it was up to the UCO's judgments what was required when it came to them staying overnight at the homes of who they targeted. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, this was long-term surveillance, if you like, long-term undercover work, where we couldn't monitor them every day, every minute.
So again, it was a matter of putting your trust in them.
There's element of trust with any checks that could be done and all picking up any indicators that something wasn't quite right.
You say at paragraph 111A that a written record was made of where UCOs were staying. What was done with that record?
I might have been incorrect there. A written record was made of where they were staying. Is this on a daily basis?
When they checked in on their check-in call?
I'm not. I remember the check-in, we would sort of tick and there would be a comment box.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that wouldn't necessarily say they're. I can't remember unless you've got examples. But I can't remember whether it said they are staying at DUF, home address, or elsewhere.
So it wouldn't necessarily record particular addresses.
No.
Was there any monitoring done generally of how much time a UCO was spending at their cover address or other addresses of activists?
No, I think best way I could explain is I think the cover officer in their conversations with the UCO would just have a general sense of, right, this week you've been staying there or you've been at home, you know, next week if they were staying at an address that we weren't sure what was going on for a long period of time, then that would obviously perhaps raise a red flag, that type of thing. But just by sort of general conversation, general knowledge, them phoning in each day.
So would UCOs understand that they did have to, they were expected to tell their handler or someone in the back office of where they were going to be staying?
Yes.
And was the recording of where they were staying a new approach or practice, or was that something you inherited and had been in place for a long time? I'll
be honest with you, I can't remember that it was actually recorded. If you say it was, then I accept that. And I can't remember if it was an old practice, a new practice. The cover officer would generally know. If somebody said to me, where is so-and-so today, do you know? You generally would know. So he was planning on staying here for 2 days and then going back home. That type of situation.
Thank you. I want to move on then to another topic. I'll come back to dealing with your time in the SDS in a moment, but I'd like to go back to when you first joined the Metropolitan Police in the first place. That was in 1977, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
You were a uniformed officer until you joined Special Branch as a constable in 1982.
Correct.
In the late 70s and early 80s, the world was a very different place in terms of racism and race discrimination. Would you accept that?
Yes,
than it is today?
Absolutely, yeah.
There was more widespread overt racism within society. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yes.
And, for example, a number of racist attacks in London throughout the 1970s, 80s, and indeed into the 90s.
Yes.
And in terms of racial diversity within the Metropolitan Police Service amongst officers when you joined, less diverse than today?
Less diverse, but there was still diversity.
And particularly less diverse amongst senior Metropolitan Police officers?
Yes.
And there were some issues within the MPS with disproportionate stop and search of young black men. Do you recall that?
Correct.
And there was a sense in the Metropolitan Police Service that black people, particularly young black men, were more likely to be seen as criminals or violent. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't.
How well equipped do you think you were to spot racism back in that time?
Well, I obviously wasn't trained because I didn't think we had training back then. I worked in King's Cross for 5 years, which was back then quite, again, diverse. We had quite a large, back then, African Caribbean population in the community. So where I worked, there wasn't really a major problem in terms of race. If you ask me about my racial awareness personally, I've never considered myself a racist or anything of that nature. I think my family is quite diverse, and I think they'd laugh if they heard me described in that way.
Did you have an understanding then, for example, of the difference between conscious and subconscious racism?
I'm not sure any of us did back then.
Between conscious and unconscious racism?
I understood, yeah.
Sorry, my mistake. And did you have an understanding of the difference between direct and indirect discrimination?
Well, at some point I did. It depends if you ask me when. Back in the late 70s, early, I don't know. I had colleagues from different ethnic backgrounds who wasn't an issue. I had a colleague who was subsequently found to be a member of the National Front and was sacked, and that was in the early 80s because he'd been identified at a National Front demonstration. So, you know, we were aware of these issues, but certainly, you know, the past is a foreign land. They do things differently there.
During your time in the SDS, did you ever come to know of anyone making a complaint about racism?
No.
What about in Special Branch?
No.
In uniform?
Complaints about racism? Not that I can recall, no.
How likely are you to have remembered?
If they'd impacted me personally, I'd remember them. If it was part of a general thing, I probably wouldn't remember, no.
Does a lack of complaints indicate a tolerance of racism within the police at that time?
Oof, goodness. I can't say. I mean, that's a sort of high-level conversation, really.
Did you witness any of your uniformed colleagues saying or doing anything racist?
No, I just gave you one example where a colleague was actually on my shift who I think we were uncomfortable around, to be fair, and someone had reported him, strangely enough, to Special Branch, who identified him at National Front demonstrations as a steward. And when confronted with this, he was asked to resign. So there was an awareness.
In Special Branch, between 1982 and joining the SDS in sometime late 2001 or early 2002, appreciating you did have some time in uniform in that period of time, yes. Did you witness any of your Special Branch colleagues saying or doing anything racist?
No.
Was there a contrast between your experience in uniform then and your experience in Special Branch?
In terms of race awareness or racism? No, not I can recall, no.
In your time in Special Branch before the SDS, it involved some work on E-Squad, is that right?
Yes, not for long.
Not for long.
No.
Did that involve working with the Sikh community at all?
Not that I remember, no.
Did you ever hear any racist comments on E-Squad?
No, we were working, with all different nationalities. We were providing threat assessments on risks to embassies, so we were having to deal with all the different nations that were, present in London.
In your time working on B-Squad, were there any prejudice comments or derogatory comments made about Irish people?
No.
Or Catholics in general?
No.
There was, though, you've told us about a feeling that justice campaigns might be manipulated by groups from the far left, is that right? And that was something that it was important to look out for?
Yes.
And what was the significance of the possibility of manipulation of justice campaigns by the far left? What did you understand them to be doing, or for what purpose?
Public order implications, incitement to public disorder.
So coming back to your time in the SDS then, did you ever witness any racist jokes or banter or stereotyping amongst UCOs or managers?
No, I think to try and create a picture of Special Branch, I think they were a group of very professional officers and detectives. We went through, if I can explain, that when you joined or applied for Special Branch, I'm not going to use the word elitist because that's wrong, but you were applying for something that was different, and special was in the name. So you went through a rigorous process when you joined, which was quite a difficult exam, and it was the only department within the whole of the Metropolitan Police where you had to sit an exam before you could even get to an interview stage. And then you were rigorously interviewed by 3 senior police officers. You would then go through a developed vetting process, which is very intrusive, and all that put together with the induction training you had at Special Branch, you had a very professional group of officers, and I think this sort of attitude of racism, perhaps you'll come on to misogyny, just wasn't part of the picture.
Were racist or misogynist jokes ever told at SDS social gatherings?
No.
Did you ever hear racial slurs or derogatory language used?
No.
You were serving in Special Branch when Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993. Can you remember the reaction within Special Branch when that happened?
I can't remember where I was back then, but I might put context down. I just can't. I know we were all aware of it.
It was a talking
reaction.
point.
I mean, we're all horrified. I think it's generally fair to say, on a number of levels.
And we dealt with some of your time on the public order desk in C Squad, but generally speaking, was Special Branch interested in receiving intelligence at that early stage on the Lawrence family and the campaign?
Oh, I can't remember.
Do you think there was any distinction drawn between information about public disorder and information about the Lawrence family and the campaign itself more generally?
I don't think so. I think, as I said before, rightly or wrongly, we were creating a full intelligence picture.
So officers weren't told not to report private or personal information concerning the Lawrence family?
Is this on C Squad or SDS? Or
in
both?
Your time in Special Branch?
In Special Branch.
From 93 onwards?
I have no specific recollection of being told or telling that.
Did you hear talk in Special Branch about Dwayne Brooks?
I knew of Dwayne Brooks and the events surrounding that, but I can't remember specific conversations about it now.
Did you ever hear anyone pronounce his first name very slowly?
No.
Did you ever hear anyone say that he was a coward for running away, which accusation is wholly unjustified?
No.
While you were in Special Branch, did Special Branch generally accept that the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the attack on Mr. Brooks was racist?
Absolutely.
And what was your understanding of the significance of the Lawrence case to the Metropolitan Police and its reputation?
It was damning, and quite rightly so, on the levels of as the report said, institutional racism. You know, the structures, procedures, processes were considered racist outcomes from those. I think we were all intelligent officers. We understood that. And on the second level was the corruption, incompetence, whatever it was, in terms of the investigation. So yes, we were very aware.
And was there a sense that it was a case which had the capacity to spark public disorder?
Yes.
And you would have been aware that there had been a number of racially motivated attacks in South East London prior to the murder of Stephen Lawrence, for example, Roland Adams on the 21st of February 1991.
I can't remember that now.
Were you aware generally that there had been a number of racist attacks?
All afterwards, yes, or when all part of the reporting around it, but actually when they occurred, no.
As a special branch officer, what was your experience of what special branch was doing about those racist attacks?
In 1991?
From your time during the 1990s, either immediately before Stephen Lawrence's murder or afterwards?
In terms of racism or racial attacks, I think you're talking about, our interest as a special branch would be if there were any organised groups involved in this. And the extreme right wing would be of crucial interest during that time.
The inquest was halted in December 1993, and there was a private prosecution brought by the family of those suspected of murdering Stephen Lawrence. And there was quite a lot of publicity about the collapse of that prosecution. Was that a talking point in Special Branch?
I have no recollection. Sorry.
Did senior Special Branch and MPS officers express an interest in intelligence concerning the Stephen Lawrence campaign, so far as you were aware?
Not that I was aware of, no.
In February 1997, there was an inquest verdict which predictably found that Stephen had been unlawfully killed by racist murderers, and the Daily Mail famously printed the headline "Murderers" the following day. Do you recall that being a topic of conversation in Special Branch?
Not a conversation, but we would obviously be aware, yes, but I can't remember any conversation.
Was there an acceptance that the inquest verdict was correct?
Yes, I'm sure, yes.
Had there been conversation up to that point as to whether or not Stephen Lawrence and Dwayne Brooks were wholly innocent?
Well, I think there was acceptance everywhere, as far as I was aware.
In March 1997, the Police Complaints Authority launched an investigation and went on to conclude that there had been failings in the investigation of Stephen's murder. Can you recall that conclusion being the subject of conversation in Special Branch?
As a general conclusion, yes, which was of great embarrassment if you were a police officer.
And in July 1997, the Stephen Lawrence inquiry was announced. What sort of views were expressed about that in Special Branch?
I can't remember specific views, but we would have just accepted that was a necessary result of what had happened.
Were there any views expressed about the Home Secretary Jack Straw's attitude towards the police?
No, and I can't remember what his attitude was, no.
Do you recall there being any difference in approach to the Stephen Lawrence campaign as compared to other family justice campaigns?
No.
Which particular customers in Special Branch were interested in the intelligence on black justice campaigns or the Stephen Lawrence campaign?
The C Squad Public Order Desk would be the main customer in terms of, as I explained earlier, the groups that were being monitored around the campaign.
It was clear at the time that the Lawrence family themselves didn't want any confrontation with the police other than on purely political grounds, wasn't it?
It's my understanding now, I can't remember, but yes.
Do you think that was accepted at the time?
No reason why it shouldn't be, no.
Was there concern that because this was a racial issue, it was potentially particularly explosive?
Yes.
From a public order perspective, but also from a police reputational perspective?
I can only speak for myself, really. I didn't really care about the reputational aspects of it. I think the reputation was already damaged. I'm not sure what our sort of monitoring or anything would how that would alter or affect that.
Was the racial dimension a reason for paying particular attention to the Lawrences?
No.
Did you get a sense that reputational damage on a racial ground, at least from those more senior to you in the MPS, was a reason why the SDS was taking a particular interest in the Lawrence family's actions?
No.
Do you accept that there was intrusive reporting on the Lawrence family themselves?
I think it comes back to what I said earlier, that as we look at it now, it would seem the case if we went back with hindsight, with the knowledge that I have now. Yes, at the time, I think the officers reporting it felt everything was relevant. We had to create a complete picture.
Just dealing then finally before we break for the morning with the Macpherson inquiry. In February 1999, the Macpherson inquiry report was published, and its defining conclusion was that institutionalised racism existed in the Metropolitan Police Service, and that was defined as the collective failure of an organisation to provide an appropriate and professional service to people because of their colour, culture, or ethnic origin through unwitting prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and racist stereotyping. It also found that the initial investigation suffered from a succession of fundamental errors, and that there were failures of leadership and mistreatment of the Lawrences and Dwayne Brooks as victims. Can you recall that report and that particular conclusion being the subject of conversation?
Yes, it was. Yes, I do.
And what sort of views were being expressed about it?
Well, I think on different levels, obviously, it depends who you spoke to. But yeah, of course, there was, I would say, the first reaction was people misunderstood what Macpherson was saying. And everybody, felt, I'm not racist. Every officer, 27,000 officers in the Met, I should imagine most of them thought, well, I'm not racist. Why are we being... Only when they realised that actually they're talking about the institution and the structures and the outcomes of those processes. I think then when there was an acceptance, yes, we've got it absolutely right.
John Grieve, who was the DAC, I think, at the time, in his witness statement, we don't need to bring it up, but just for reference, it's MPS 0749658 at paragraph 46 at pages 29 and 30 of his statement. He states that there were people who didn't like that he had accepted the allegation of institutional racism and that he was receiving hate mail internally and externally and was called a traitor by some officers. Were you aware of that type of attitude at the time? Is that what you were just referring to?
Not in my immediate sort of network, the officers around me, no. I mean, I think there was, I could say, every officer that I was aware of, we just accepted, yes, got it badly wrong for many, many years, going back to Scarman, in fact.
Do you think that racist attitudes affected how Special Branch and later SDS managers and officers approached black people and black justice campaigns, including assumptions that they were more likely to be criminal, violent or disorderly?
No.
Did such attitudes affect how the Lawrence family were perceived by the Special Branch or the SDS?
I didn't accept that, no.
Were those attending the Lawrence family home, supporting the family or campaigning on their behalf assumed to be a public order threat?
No.
Were you ever aware of any discussions about disclosing the SDS's activities in terms of reporting on the Lawrences, the Lawrence family campaign and the Macpherson inquiry to the Macpherson inquiry?
To the Macpherson inquiry? On the family itself? No.
Were you aware of any discussions about disclosing the SDS activities in terms of
I see.
reporting on them to the Macpherson inquiry?
Sorry, no.
Do you consider their reporting, their activities ought to have been disclosed to the Macpherson inquiry?
That's difficult for me to say. I'm sure that's at a more senior sort of policy strategic level, but again, with benefit of hindsight, probably yes, but probably at the time we would have argued we're just looking out for public order.
Thank you. So is that a convenient moment for a break?
Certainly. We have a 15-minute break
Thank you.
in the middle of each session, and now's the time.
sir. Before I move on, I just want to go back to one document and ask you another couple of questions about it, please, if I may. It's MPS 0748392. This is the detailed report that you wrote on Stephen Lawrence campaign and associated organisations. And if we could go to page 2, please. So there we see the first page of the report there. And you can see underneath the title, it says, "This note is produced for the information of the Commissioner of Police, DAC Grieve, and Superintendent Thornton. It contains secret and delicate source material. There should be no downwards dissemination of this document without reference to the Detective Superintendent SO12 C Squad." Do you see that?
I do, yes.
I wanted to ask you about the circumstances in which you came to produce this report for that particular audience. Do you recall who asked you to prepare this?
I don't have any recollection of how I was asked. All I can say is that normally this would come down on a request, like on a minute sheet from probably through Chief Superintendent C Squad, from, I don't know, in this case probably the Commissioner's office, or I don't know who Superintendent Thornton is, but that would be the normal. It just come down to the desk, they say they want a note on the campaign and its associated organisations.
And so to have recorded these particular 3 people as being the note to be produced for the information of those 3,
yes,
you would have been asked specifically to address this report to them. That wouldn't have been your choice, it would have been a request made to you, is that right?
yes.
And you think because it is produced for the information of the Commissioner of Police, it was likely his office that had requested that? Down through the chain of command?
Yeah, I don't know that for fact, but there would be a reasonable assumption, yes.
Thank you. And the sources you were working from in order to produce this report, would that have included SDS reporting?
Yes, there's no reason why it wouldn't, no.
And would you have known which particular UCO, for example, would you have known if it was HN81 David Hagan's reporting that was being relied upon?
At this stage, I'm not sure what the date was and when my knowledge was of that individual.
Well, this report's dated the 10th of September 1998.
I can't remember specifically, but it would have included the whole intelligence picture as we knew it, which obviously would include SDS. I wouldn't know where specifically in SDS that come from.
What other sources would you have been relying on to produce this particular report?
Well, as I said earlier, we get reporting from all sorts. We can get reporting from uniform officers who've picked up local information through just normal community liaison. We would have got information from open source information, might be publications, media reporting, local newspapers. There might be CHIS reporting, either locally or in special branch if there were sources like that. So a whole raft of sources.
Do you recall if you received any feedback in relation to this report once you'd submitted it?
I don't know, no.
In relation to a report like this, would you have expected to receive any kind of feedback from those you'd addressed it to, including the Commissioner, or not?
Not necessarily, no. I think it obviously was quite an important document for us if it's being requested by the Metro Police, but we were also dealing with a myriad of threat assessments for other events that were occurring at any particular time. So we would have sent that off and be moving on to the next threat assessment or whatever.
Okay, thank you. That can be taken down now, thank you. I want to look at, please, MPS 0062785. It's tab B85 of the bundle, sir. And if we could go to page 5, please. This is a report from HN 104, Carlo Saraki, and we can see here that there was reporting included on the Socialist Party and the de Menendez shooting campaign, the Jean-Charles de Menendez family justice campaign. Does this report again demonstrate the view that justice campaigns might be manipulated by groups from the far left here, the Socialist Party?
I think that's a fair assessment, yes.
And that was one of the things to look out for. And there's a further report, MPS 00655222, tab 88. It doesn't need to be shown on screen. That can be taken down. And that's reporting on a particular individual and the Justice for Jean campaign, and a mention recorded on the 19th of April 2006. And then if we can just look at, please, MPS 00644378, it's at tab B87 of the bundle. And this is a report dated the 22nd of November 2005. And if we can just enlarge the top half of the page, please. So we see here that at number 2, information has been received relating to the shooting by police of Jean-Charles de Menendez. A coalition to campaign for the end of the shoot-to-kill policy has been formed. And then the gist over the redacted section says that what's been redacted is further information includes address details and email address details. And then at the very bottom of the page, the information at 2 was not passed to the desk to prevent any danger of unnecessary intrusion. So it seems that at least by this time in 2005, when this report was written, there was some recognition and understanding by SDS managers that justice campaigns involving police accountability raised obvious risks of disproportionate intrusion. Do you agree?
I agree. There were risks, obviously, yes.
And those risks seem to be recognised here, because the information that was personal, the redacted section at 2, wasn't passed on to the desk, as we see from the bottom of the note. Would you agree?
So is this a SDS report? Sorry,
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I'd agree with that.
But that wasn't something you recognised at the time, in your time at the SDS?
In terms of...
That campaigns involving police accountability raised obvious risks of disproportionate intrusion?
I think there was always a risk, and we were always treading a fine line. So, intelligence gathering is risk assessment is a necessary part of that. It may be that we were straying onto the wrong side at some point, and it looks from here that somebody I don't know who the author is, obviously, has brought it back to what we consider now to be the right side.
Yes, thank you. That can be taken down now, thank you. In your witness statement at paragraph 80B at page 32, you say that you may have been HN18's handler for a short time before D.A.S. Gilbertson took responsibility for him. Did you play any role in the decision that HN18 should infiltrate the international solidarity movement?
No.
Whose decision would that have been?
I would be guessing, so probably not a good thing to do, but I would imagine Ron Gilbertson would have been part of the process. And DCI Dell, I think, may have covered that. I don't know.
Was the choice of D.S. Gilbertson to take over from you as HN18's handler due to his work on the Palestinian desk, do you know?
Well, on E-Squad, yes. Yeah.
Did you ever discuss with D.S. Gilbertson his views on Islamic extremism in relation to advocacy for Palestinian rights?
If I did, I can't remember, but it's not the sort of thing we would discuss generally. I think we were just aware that post 9/11 there was a demand to get intelligence, beyond just domestic extremism.
Was there a view that the Palestinian issue was starting to become associated with Islamic fundamentalism?
I can't remember now, sorry.
I want to look at HN 18's performance development review, please, that you undertook. The document is MPS 00319990 at tab B69 of the bundle. This is a performance development review that on the 8th of March 2004, you've signed the document in the relevant place. It records, if we go over the page, please, and again. It records there at the top box objectives for the coming year. Do you see that? And it says, develop with DS Beels a long-term targeting strategy for Operation Morocco. Do you recall what Operation Morocco was?
No, I obviously wrote that, but there's no recollection of what that meant.
So you wouldn't have you won't be able to help us with why there was a need to develop a long-term targeting strategy for it?
Not after all these years, no.
It seems that all of the boxes in this performance development review are ticked as 2, which means competent, with no particular comment associated with them. Were these reviews essentially a tick box exercise?
No.
So what was done to evaluate HN18's performance, actual performance?
Whenever we were doing performance reviews, we would obviously know the officer quite well. We would know, what their performance had been personally, so we were able to comment accordingly. This one I haven't seen. Can you show me the tick
if you go
box?
over the page again.
I think let's see what is 1 and what is 2. I can't remember, and 3.
Well, we know that 2 is deemed competent.
Okay. So that reflects my judgment at the time. He was competent in those qualities that we were assessing.
And how would you perform that assessment?
Again, because you're working closely with him, you're receiving his reports. You're meeting with him regularly, you're attending meetings where he's present, so you would understand what he's producing and how he's producing it, so what his performance is, so it would grade it accordingly.
Thank you, that can be taken down. In your witness statement at paragraph 186C at page 78, you say in relation to Mr. Atif Chowdhury that you have no particular knowledge of him, but activists who had been assessed as having the potential to cause serious disorder would be monitored. We know that there was extensive personal reporting by HN18 on Mr. Chowdhury across the period of management by you, albeit that you may not have always been his handler. Were you unaware of that reporting on him at the time, or would you have known about it?
I have no recollection of that whatsoever. Has Ron Gilbertson taken over at this point, do we know? Or?
I think, well, the reporting spans a period of time, and for some of that period, certainly DS Gilbertson was likely to have taken over from you.
Which might explain why I have no knowledge. Ron was considered the expert in this area, so it was very much left for him to get on and address that. So.
And would that reporting have been discussed at the weekly meetings?
Probably, if there was intelligence of relevance.
There's various reporting that's very personal on him in relation to his girlfriend, in relation to his family and their employment, and in relation to his company, which imported Palestinian olive oil, Zaytoon. Do you now accept that that reporting is inappropriate, given its personal nature?
I can only sound like the record from earlier, that the reporting then, the officers were encouraged to report as much as possible. It may well now, with hindsight, strayed into areas where they shouldn't have done. But I think at the time, our thinking was, we need the full picture.
Given that you didn't have any particular knowledge of him, how do you say that he was an activist who had been assessed as having the potential to cause serious disorder, such that he needed monitoring?
Sorry, did I say that in the statement?
You did, yes. It's paragraph 186C at page 78.
I can only assume that's mistaken. Sorry, what paragraph again?
186C at page 78. So I have no particular knowledge of Atif Chowdhury, but activists who had been assessed as having the potential to cause serious disorder would be monitored.
I think that's just a general observation. I don't think that's in particular to any individual. Or
It's not a view you formed personally about him in particular.
Oh, no. Perhaps that's clumsily written.
You were HN 118's handler, and he reported erroneously on Mr. Chowdhury as being a leading light of the international solidarity movement. How were you not aware of his reporting if you were his handler?
Because I can't remember. So.
Okay. If we could look at, please, MPS 0031940. This isn't in your bundle, but it is in HN 118's bundle, at tab C 285. And if we can look, please, at paragraph 4 on page 1. This is a report on globalised resistance, and it then says at this paragraph, these ISMers, the International Solidarity Movement, and a small core of recently returned from Gaza independent activists, are extremely radical in outlook, perhaps not surprisingly, as many of them have spent considerable periods of time in the Balata refugee camp and Gaza and other areas of the occupied territories. Direct action is in their blood, and if they get organised, they would become a potent new force on the London activist scene. Do you think you were aware of this report, given you were HN 118's handler?
I was his handler, but I have no recollection of that reporting at all.
The language there used extremely radical and in their blood. Is that language influenced by a discriminatory perception in relation to Palestinians and Muslims?
I don't think so. I think that term could be used for anybody.
You wouldn't have considered giving feedback on this report to HN 118 that he had a racial bias in this reporting?
If I thought he had, I would, yes.
But not in relation to this report, if you think this language is appropriate?
All right. He's talking about direct action. I don't think he's talking about any particular ethnic quality. Is he talking about the group or the activists themselves?
The activists themselves, and described as extremely radical in outlook, and direct action is in their blood.
I think it's perhaps just a careless phrase. I don't think it's anything more than that, really.
HN 118 commented on that there was a benefit to the UK in actively collaborating in intelligence sharing with other national police authorities. Did you understand part of his role was gathering information which could be shared with Israeli state authorities?
No, I have no knowledge of that.
And would you have understood that the maintenance of the UK's relationship with Israel formed part of the SDS function or his tasking?
Not that I was aware of, no.
what policing purpose did HN 118's reporting, which didn't involve ISM London activists but involved ISM Palestine, serve? It couldn't be a public order purpose relating to policing London, could it?
At this stage, I don't know. It may have been, not knowing the fuller context, it may have been some relevance, but unless I have the fuller context, I can't really comment.
Thank you. That can be taken down. I want to move on to HN 18, Robert Hastings' arrest on the 11th of September 2007. He was arrested at the DSEI Arms Fair demonstration at the Excel Centre and was subsequently charged with aggravated trespass and released on bail to attend Stratford Magistrates Court on the 21st of September 2007. Do you recall that?
I do.
You deal with this in paragraph 259A of your witness statement at page 108, and you say that you were the duty officer that weekend, which is why you would have been contacted by him and told of his arrest. And you say you can't recall specific details. If we look at MPS 0076134, so tab B108 of the bundle, at page 8, please. This is the operational direction for DC Hastings, HN 18, and it appears there that you were contacted at about 11:30 at night on Tuesday, the 11th of September. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
What was your role in supervising him as duty cover officer before he was arrested in relation to this particular protest?
As duty officer, I would have had no particular involvement in his role. That would have been a cover officer. I would have been briefed as the duty officer that out of hours he's involved in a demonstration or something of that nature. So I would just have an awareness that, you know, I've got the phone, I may be contacted.
And again, at paragraph 259A, page 108 of your witness statement, you say that he'd been advised and briefed by you on the previous day, Monday the 10th of September, as per this document, and specifically the entry on the 12th of September 2007, you say, I reminded him not to act outside his authorisation and to maintain a passive role. This would have been part of the risk assessment. He would have known to only act within the authorisation he had been given, which he was reminded of. So what was the limit of his authorisation so far as participation in this protest was, so far as you were concerned?
Well, as generally with the UCOs, they were briefed that they weren't to get involved in crime unless they'd already got prior authority. There was a recognition, obviously, that there are circumstances where it's unavoidable, but they're to take all necessary action they can to not get involved. So to have an excuse, have an exit strategy if something does start to go wrong. So he might have been reminded of that in those sort of terms.
Would you have told him not to get arrested?
To avoid arrest as much as possible, as best as possible.
What was the purpose of his participation in the protest?
That I can't remember because, one, he wasn't my officer. He was, I think at this stage he was Ron Gilbertson's. So I was just the conduit, really, when there was an issue that needed escalating.
We can see from page 7 of this document that his participation included plans to socialise with activists, giving them dinner at his flat and staying overnight with them. What was the reason for that?
I can't remember.
All intelligence potentially relevant to public order policing had been provided by Sunday the 9th of September, hadn't it? We can see at page 7, and it was already known that there would undoubtedly be a strong police presence at the protest.
Right.
So what was the public order policing benefit for him to socialise with activists, to stay overnight with them and then participate in this protest?
Just so we have the intelligence from the inside as to what their intentions could change at any point, and they could go off to cause trouble somewhere else. So if we've got somebody on the inside, then that gets useful intelligence.
HN 72 writes in his witness statement, we don't need to bring it up, but for reference, it's MPS 0749345, paragraph 400A little I, page 184. He says that you told him that Rob was locked on with his target group in the East End. Do you recall telling him that?
I don't know, sir.
Is locked on the sort of language you would use?
No, I don't recognise it. I'm not
Do you
exactly
know what,
sure what it...
Do you know what
what
it means?
Locked on? No. Well, close to, perhaps, but I'll be guessing.
And in terms of your supervision of him following the briefing and him attending the protest, did your supervision amount to waiting by the phone as duty officer?
Yes.
And once you'd received the phone call in relation to his arrest, what was your role in supervising him after that?
I can't remember specifically, but obviously I would be concerned what his arrangements were from that point onwards to presumably having a meeting with his cover officer or the DI at the earliest possible opportunity. But I think effectively, I can't remember the set of circumstances, but the duty officer, me on this occasion, would normally sort of step back if the cover officer is taking over or the DI becomes involved. So I can't add any more detail.
Thank you. That can be taken down now. You say at paragraph 259, page 108 of your witness statement, that you told him not to declare himself to the custody sergeant. You say that was because he may endanger himself. It wasn't yet necessary, as he'd not yet been charged and may not have been charged ultimately. Is that right?
Yes.
And you immediately informed your DI HN 72?
Yes.
Would you have expected HN 72 then to inform the DCI?
Yes.
And if he'd done so, would you have expected the DCI to report it up the chain of command, or would it stop at DCI?
No, it would. I would expect it to go up the chain at some point. There would be consultations, obviously, and perhaps legal advice, depending on how things were progressing.
And to what sort of level would you expect it to go up?
I mean, once it got to DCI, I'm not involved anymore. So, what conversations would be had? I think certainly it would go to the head of the squad. So, in this case, E squad. I would think, yes. I mean, the head of the squad would want to know an officer's been arrested at one of the events that they're gathering intelligence on. So certainly up to, I would say, squad chief superintendent. Okay.
You said that you think your involvement in the matter ceased because it was probably passed back to HN 30, who was HN 18's cover officer. Is that right?
I assume that would be the process, yes.
We know that he was subsequently charged, and you go on to say in your witness statement that you don't know if there would have been time for his cover officer or the DI to intervene prior to him being charged. We know also that HN 72 was removed from the unit after this, and you say in your witness statement at paragraph 261C at page 110 that you think the arrest may have presented DCI Flood, who had a poor working relationship with HN 72, an opportunity to remove him. And you also hold a suspicion that DCI Flood and Detective Superintendent McKinney used this as an excuse to close the SDS. Why is it you think that?
Again, I'm uncomfortable talking about this because it does sound a bit like sort of office gossip, because I've got no facts to back this up, but just knowing that my assessment, and I think the assessment of others on the unit, for instance, had a consciousness that there was going to be, the unit was probably going to be closed down, and the fact that I think there was quite vociferous arguments between 72 and either Flood or McKinney, I can't remember, that my perception, nothing more than that, was that they found, we've got a good opportunity here to either close the unit or to turn it into our own particular model. But I've got no facts to base that on.
Thank you. I just want to look at HN 118's reporting, as you were his cover officer. Could we have MPS 0073489 on the screen, please? It's in HN 118's bundle. This is a UCO Ringwraith, who is HN 118. It's entitled Access Document, and it says at the very top in the first paragraph that it seeks to briefly detail the individuals and groups to which UCO Ringwraith has access for the purpose of intelligence reporting. HN 118 was asked about this in evidence and accepted that throughout this document it was exaggerated in that his level of access, his level of infiltration into the groups described was exaggerated. Do you know if you wrote this document as his cover officer, his handler?
I don't recognise the document. I don't even recognise the format, to be honest.
Do you recall seeing it at the time?
No. I do know we were interested in the G8 in Germany. So I think we'd had a request, is there any intelligence on that? So this report is probably, part of that intelligence gathering plan. If Ringwraith 118, says it's exaggerated, then I'll obviously accept that. He's I've got every respect for him. Which makes me think that I didn't write it, because I've worked closely with him and I would have known. So this may be some third party writing. It seems strange, I know.
As his handler, though, wouldn't you have seen, if it's not your document, wouldn't you have seen it at the time?
I should have done, yes.
And how do you think this document came to give such an exaggerated account of the level of access he had in relation to these groups, when those in the group say they barely knew him in some cases?
That's a very good question. It would be helpful if I knew who the author was, obviously. If one of the other cover officers had been asked to write a note very urgently or something of that nature, they might have just got a quick verbal update or something. I honestly, I'm struggling to understand, because if 118 and I were trying to provide an intelligence assessment overview, we would have discussed it. I would have run it past him. I would have had the knowledge, probably any case. So this seems a sort of rather random document that somebody may have produced urgently, might have got a phone call saying we need something on this without really consultation, but I'm guessing.
If it's prepared by someone in the SDS back office, a manager or supervisor, given HN 118's evidence that it's wholly exaggerated, that represents a failure in oversight of and supervision of him, doesn't it? That this document comes to be created in such exaggerated form.
I agree, absolutely. I'd like to see where it's exaggerated, to what degree. I mean, it's obviously a general overview.
Well, it describes, for example, on the first page, in relation to the dissent network, excellent, comprehensive and in-depth access to the remnants of the UK dissent network. He's accepted that his level of access to groups is exaggerated throughout this document.
Right. Well, I think we may well come on to it, but the Glen Eagles G8 2005 dissent network, he was part of. So I mean, that's reasonable to say, unless he's misunderstood, he was involved. The UK dissent network is not
as such an organised structure. It's a group of activists from all over who sort of go under a banner. So it's difficult to say what your access is, because you'd need to know there was a structure, a hierarchy, that type of thing. There weren't. It was like a bunch of anarchists or extreme left-wing activists. So your access may depend on what part of the network you're in. So I think if I'd written that, I would have perhaps explained it that way. So
in relation to, that could be taken down, thank you. In relation to HM 118's CHIS authorisation document, your name appears in that as the handler officer. Again, HM 118 accepted that his CHIS authorisation was exaggerated in terms of over-exaggerating what access he had to his groups that he was targeting. What role did you have in providing information for CHIS authorisation documents for HN 118? Was it you who wrote them up?
it would be normally, yes.
And where did you get that information from? Was it solely from HM 118?
If it was his, yes, for his authorisation, yes.
So, again, if he was exaggerating and you included that exaggerated account in a CHIS authorisation document, that represents a failure in supervision of him in that you didn't realise that's what you were doing.
If that's what happened, then yes, I accept that.
So that would then, the consequence of that would mean that the authorisation itself was based on misleading information, wouldn't
If that was true, yes.
Thank you. I'd like to move on then to the Tradecraft Manual. You deal with this at paragraph 150, page 64 of your witness statement, and you say, I was aware of a Tradecraft Manual in the office which I understood to be a combination of general guidance, best practice and regulations. During my initial briefings on the SDS, I would have been told about it, although I cannot recall this explicitly because I became familiar with it. Tradecraft was part of our bread and butter, and cover officers would have been required to know tradecraft issues just as much as the UCOs. The manual contained both binding rules and general guidance, and I do not recall specifically its contents, but the contents generally covered how to deal with tradecraft issues. So far as you recall, you would have read this manual when you joined the SDS as a unit.
Yes, I mean, it would be normal to have read it. I have to say, it was never considered as an authoritative document. I mean, the way it's even put together was like musings, you know, of different officers. There was no structure as far as I can remember to it. So it's the sort of thing we look at, but I don't think it was what drove the SDS in terms of tradecraft. It was just something. It looked to me, if I remember, as individual officers who sat down and thought, "Oh, that might be useful. I'll put that in," and updated that way. But there was no structure. There was no one supervisor or manager in charge of it who was directing it. It was a loose assembly of documents put into one folder, which, from my memory, was stuck in a cupboard out the way.
But it was important for you to be familiar with it because it was giving guidance to the UCOs who you were supervising.
Yeah.
And were you told at the time, or did you appreciate at the time, that it contained guidance to UCOs about sexual liaisons?
Only since I've read that on the inquiry.
Were you involved in new UCO recruits training at all?
Yes, a couple of times.
And would that have included instructing them to read the Tradecraft Manual?
Unfortunately, it may have done, yes.
Because it would be important for all new recruits to be familiar with the Tradecraft guidance.
Yes, again, I don't think I would have put a lot of weight on it. I would have, here's some ideas some guys have written down, have a look at it. But I would not have presented it as this is the definitive codes of practice for SDS tradecraft.
Despite the fact that that's what the introduction says.
Yes, I think I don't know how long ago it had been written, but certainly my view, and I think others may share a view, was that it wasn't the definitive codes of practice. It was more almost discussion documents.
Can we have a look at it, please? MPS 0527597, it's at tab B5 of the bundle. If we can look at pages 27 and 28, please. So we see at paragraph 5.6.1, under the heading Sexual Liaisons, the thorny issue of romantic entanglements during a tour is the cause of much soul-searching and concern. In the past, emotional ties to the opposition have happened and caused all sorts of difficulties, including divorce, deception, and disciplinary charges. While it is not my place to moralise, one should try to avoid the opposite sex for as long as possible. And then if we look at paragraph 5.6.3, while you may try to avoid any sexual encounter, there may come a time when your lack of interest may become suspicious. In these circumstances, you can either try to introduce an appropriate male or female from your own relations or friends to meet the wearies on a few occasions, or ask the officer if they can find an ex-SDS operative to fill such a role. If you have no other option but to become involved with a weary, you should try to have fleeting, disastrous relationships with individuals who are not important to your sources of information. So just looking at the language used here, it's not prohibitive of sexual relationships, is it? It's permissive of them.
It is, yes.
And it clearly contemplates sexual relationships in some circumstances, doesn't it? Such as it being necessary to maintain a UCO's cover.
That's what it says, yes.
And it certainly doesn't prohibit long-term relationships, and indeed it doesn't prohibit any form of sexual activity with a non-activist, does it?
I accept that's what it says, yes.
In fact, it encourages sexual liaisons with people not important to the UCO sources, doesn't it?
It does.
And which would be a considered decision to enter into a deceitful sexual relationship with a chosen person.
Yes.
And to manipulate that relationship to make sure it was fleeting and disastrous.
That's what it says, yes.
You say at paragraph 224, page 92 of your witness statement, that this was an old document that does not reflect the policy or my understanding of the policy at the time I was on the unit. Is that right?
That's correct.
So your evidence is that this section on sexual liaisons in the Tradecraft Manual had been superseded by the time you were in the SDS.
Agreed, yes.
And it had been superseded, was that by DCI Dell's instruction, instruction?
Yes.
I'm going to come back to further details of that in a moment, but if that's correct, giving the Tradecraft Manual to UCOs to read, or even having it available to read in the office, would have given the UCOs a confused picture of SDS management's attitude to sexual relationships, wouldn't it?
Yes. It's a terrible mistake. It should not have been left there. It should have been shredded.
So if you'd appreciated that contradictory advice, having read this section of the manual, what would you have done about it?
I would have shredded this. Yes, I would have got rid of it.
And why didn't you, do you think, if you accept that you would have read it on arriving at the SDS?
I can't explain. I would have read it, yes, but when I read it again since this inquiry, I was horrified. So whether I didn't read it dutifully, I can't recall, obviously. But it should not have been there. I accept that. And it just did not reflect the culture at the time and the instructions as DCI Dell had clearly laid down. It should have been got rid of, and it shouldn't have been shown to any new officers. I think it was, if I'd done that, it was probably lazy.
When were you first aware of the prohibition on sexual relationships undercover? Was it clear from the outset of your time on the unit?
It was. I worked with Mike Dell before. I knew him well, so I knew his moral stance on things. I knew, and I've no doubt he would have, when he briefing me on joining the unit, he would have made absolutely clear what the boundaries are, and that would have been quite clear to me.
Clear from him?
From him, yes.
So you would have understood from that express prohibition that the SDS management acknowledged that there was a risk of sexual relationships undercover, because why was a prohibition, an express prohibition, necessary otherwise?
Yes, no, except that there was a risk, yes.
And was that risk of sexual relationships discussed openly amongst management in the SDS office?
Not specifically, to my recollection, no. There was an understanding. We all knew, where we stood on these issues.
DCI Dell's direction to the UCOs, I said I'd come back to the details of that direction. You recall him giving a direction to UCOs that sexual relationships in their undercover identity were not permitted. When did he give that direction to UCOs?
It may well have been before I joined. I can't remember unless you have a date. I know you talked about the plenary session. I can't even remember if I was at the plenary session as such. I just knew from the outset. I mean, it didn't really take Mike Dell to tell me. I mean, this is a breach of their vetting, if nothing else. They were developed vetting officers. If they were to engage in unlawful inappropriate sexual relationships, that's a matter for the vetting officer as well to be informed. So it's just not something that we would have permitted.
In terms of his direction to UCOs, in your witness statement at paragraph 89C at page 35, you say at that interview, and you're referring there to the formal interview for recruitment of UCOs to the SDS, DCI generally would be the one who would lay down the law on the ethics of undercover policing as required by the SDS, including criminal activity, sexual relationships and drug taking. He would be quite clear on those issues at this stage. So it was before even recruiting a UCO that direction was given to them, is that right?
That's right. I remember going to one, that's a part of the recruitment process. I'm going to go on to talk about visiting at the family home. But
yes, and so was it also given in that meeting at the family home with the UCO's partner?
Yeah, I can't remember who, but I remember specifically sitting with Mike Dell and him telling the female partner of whichever officer it was that he considered the SDS had a contract with her and with the UCO, and if that contract was broken by the UCO, that the contract that we have with the partner would be to tell them that he was basically off the unit because of misbehaviour or inappropriate conduct.
So in what DCI Dell was telling both the UCO and their partner, would the partner have been have understood that there was indeed a risk of sexual relationships developing undercover?
I think that's a natural development of anybody understanding how human beings operate.
Did DCI Dell reiterate that prohibition at the beginning of each UCO's deployment in training?
He would have done. I can't remember specifically, but that's the way he worked. He would, yes.
So the prohibition was given, on your evidence, a number of times to any given UCO before they deployed into the field. Is that right?
I can't remember if it was a number of times. It's just something that was understood by all. It was a prohibition. Now, how often that was said and in what context, I can't remember.
In your witness statement at paragraphs 108B and 115 at pages 47 to 48, you refer to legend assessments, that can be taken down, thank you, where a UCO's legend would be tested effectively in the office before they deployed into the field. Do you recall that?
Yes, vaguely.
And Why then wasn't there anything built into legends to prevent sexual relationships developing when the risk was so clearly being acknowledged by this express prohibition?
Just because there was a risk didn't mean we wouldn't go ahead. It's not a risk-free environment. We would expect the officers, and majority of them did, build into their legends reasons for not getting engaged in relationships.
So
Firstly,
it was
they
left
knew,
to the officer?
in consultation with the cover officer probably, in terms of developing, right, well, if this happens, I'm going to have, I've had a fallout or something with a previous partner, I've been, hurt emotionally, I just something of that nature. I mean, yes, it would be left largely to the officer because he knows his network, his situation, to come up with some strategy that was relevant to his situation to avoid those sort of situations. This is what we expected. Obviously, it failed on occasions.
Isn't that a management failure also?
Yes.
The mitigation should have been put in place more specifically by management.
Yes.
In your witness statement, at paragraph 115, you say the mechanism put in place to mitigate this risk was a clear prohibition on doing so from the SDS management. There were clear instructions from the outset of their deployment that it was not allowed. That mitigation clearly was completely inadequate with the benefit of hindsight, wasn't it?
In certain cases it was, yes.
Did DCI Dell reiterate the prohibition at any time throughout a UCO's deployment, or was it only at the beginning?
I can't recall. He may have done personally, one-to-one when speaking to the officer, if there's a reason for it to have come up. He might have said at a meeting. I just can't recall. But
it might have come up at a weekly meeting.
Culturally, if you like, within the organisation, it was a no-go area.
Were inquiries ever made of any UCOs as to whether this had become an issue for them individually?
Not in my experience.
You didn't make any?
Any sort of...
Inquiries of UCOs as to whether they were having an issue with a risk of sexual relationship?
No, I've thought about this quite a lot. What should be the supervisory approach in these circumstances? And I struggled to come up with an answer to it, to be honest. My approach, and I can only speak for myself, is one really, as I said earlier, I think, of trust and observe. Now, that's not blind trust. I just see trust as part of the supervision in that, an officer is more likely to either open up, share, but also, give indicators if I can have a relationship with them, where I can see them when they're relaxed or when they're not on the defensive. If I then turn around and say, Sean, how are you? I'm all right. What are you up to at the moment? Oh, not much. How are you? All right. I said, are you having an affair with an activist? You say, what? I said, are you having an affair with an activist?
Well,
he would say, well, no, of course not. And then, I think the trust would have been undermined. I envisage a situation where, I've got this in my mind that I've said this to him when he's at home and his wife and children are out somewhere and they've come back, and then he's there looking a bit shocked